Alright, so here is just a quick note on using a tablet like the Wacom tablet. This is something that Dogwaffle can generally handle. You can see here I'm drawing and I'm changing the pressure. So if I'm barely touching the surface of my tablet, it's going to be very thin lines. And you can adjust, usually in the tablet settings, how sensitive you want that to be. There's also some information here somewhere. Rotating one of these here, this one maybe. Haven't been there. That tablet pressure, right? So you can give it very light or very strong, and then that defines a bigger dynamic range. If you press it hard, it scales it so it can actually go with that, I think. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly. There's some tablet info, some initialization. You can see in the lower left corner, maximum value. So yeah, you should have 1024, from 0 to 1023 values detectable. And with that, you should have the full dynamic range, and it should be ready to go. So if you draw very lightly, it will give you very thin lines. And if you barely touch it, you might not even see them. You can of course always adjust also the size of the brush on top of that to make it even thinner, and then maybe the opacity to make it appear even thinner. So some of these lines may just barely visible there, and stuff like that, right? But there's a couple of other things too. For one, you can see in the settings here, the brush settings, there is a parameter called pen angle. And what that does is it looks at the at how you hold the pen, or it's adding actually, like the tooltip says, use the direction of the pointer's motion to determine the angle of the brush. Now, if it's something like like this round dot, you can't really see a change in rotation. So it's better if you pick something up that's definitely got some orientation you can detect. Like for example, with the custom brush pickup tool here, I'm going to pick this eye with the marquee. And so now if I show the preview, you can see it here. It's a little bit, need more opacity, need the original full size. And so now if I don't have this pen angle, the orientation of that will remain the same, right? If I go like this, individual clicks is one thing, but then also if I draw it, it just stays the same orientation. Whereas if I go with the pen angle, it's calculating the orientation, and it's still also doing the change in the size, so it can do very thin and then very hard pressure there with the pen, but it's also drawing at a different angle. So that's another thing you can exploit. Now with the tablet, if you uncheck that, you might still be able to also have it rotate, depending on the pen you have. So right now I don't have a pen with the angle coming through. If I twist it along the axis, if I hold the pen like by the end and then I twist it, nothing turns. Right? It's changing the pressure. You can see it's saying change the size, but it's not rotating. Whereas there is another pen. I have a 6D pen. This is the Wacom 3 Intuos 3, pretty old USB. But with this, if you turn it, it also turns the image, even if you didn't have the, even if you go on a straight line, right? I mean, it's one thing to turn it as a result of you changing the path, like with this option here, or this option here, pen angle. There, even if you hold the pen still, but you move it around, you can see the whole thing is turning. That's a different thing, right? That's based on the path. Whereas now I'm also turning it based on which way I wiggle the pen. Right? And so some pens will do that, and that can be very interesting if you want to do something that looks like a like a thin line versus a wide line, other than pressing harder, because you could do that. But if you have a line, let's do this for example here. Let's go with a regular brush like this, right? And you want to, maybe it's a perfect rectangle or just something like that. And in fact, I'm going to pick a portion of it as the custom brush. Where's my custom brush pickup tool? There it is. And I'm going to say, let's go something like this. Pick it up, right? And you could even get rid of the white glow on the transition there. That's another topic, but it's doable. Now, if you have the pen angle, it will change. But if you don't have the pen angle, you can still make it change. And in fact, you can use that explicitly if you want to say, well, let's go draw a line this way and then rotate it. So it's drawing, like a thin line. This is much thinner and this is much wider. Right, so you can. It's almost like a Copic marker or some sort of a marker with the tip is indeed mimicking that. It's actually gotten more angles. We just use that particular angle along the axis of the pen, but you do have also how much tilt you give it, vertical against the tablet or horizontal. That I don't think we use. There are some software. I think Photoshop has some integration with that. There are some software that will use all three axes. All three dimensions. There are three rotational angles. You could be coming in. Actually, this one does work. Right? That's basically if I'm holding it. Let's say I put it in the middle of the page or middle of the tablet, and then I lean it down, and so it's showing like 3 o'clock on the analog clock, and then I turn it. You see, as I'm turning it, it's turning with it. So I'm turning it not along the axis. I can do that too. That's actually another way to do it. Same result in this case. Anyway, so I just wanted to give you some ideas of some of the stuff you can do and exploit, because whatever you have loaded as a brush, it tends to be even more interesting if you give it a little bit of angular behavior, and of course also some random. There are some angles, there are some opacities controlled by the brush, so you can have it thicker or thinner. Let's go back to this one here. So you can see when it's very thin, it's also more translucent, and when you press harder, it's more opaque. So that's something you can also do. Let's give it a different color, maybe yellowish. So here, and then when I press harder, it's completely opaque and masking it, whereas here you still see through it. So you have the opacity, the size, not necessarily, you could make it a fixed size, but you still have the opacity. So very thin airbrushing or very opaque airbrushing, depending on how much you press down. Right, let's go with a different color here, maybe red. So very thin. And you can always adjust the base here so it's even thinner than that with the opacity here. They're going to combine, I think. And then so you can do very light airbrushing, and then you can do very hard opaque airbrushing. So here now you blank out all these lines. The white lines we had here before, they're disappearing too. Anyway, so there's that, and then of course there's all sorts of other parameters with tinting, some random, some speed related, random positioning, random size. All sorts of funky stuff here. Random angle. So even though you think you may have a good hand going and controlling it, it may have a little jittery on top of that. And so now it's a little bit less predictable. It's got a little bit of bumpiness to that. Plus you can also have some random hue, saturation value. So it will start looking very different as you paint with this. This is a very used old brush now, with a lot of oil paint still attached to it, if you will. Alright, well, thanks for watching, and hope you get to enjoy the fancy painting techniques with Howler going through not just the mouse, but with the pen of a tablet. The brush, by the way, I mean the mouse has some capabilities too. You see, right now I'm using the mouse, so it still has some angular behavior too, and that's because of this one here. Right? If you take that off, then it's got the randomness still to that, right? So it's not completely void of behavior that might be associated with typically a tablet. Now I've turned the angular thing off. I have the opacity. Let's get rid of that. So the only opacity control is right here now, and you can see a preview of that. It's barely visible, so you paint a lot, or you make it fully opaque, and then it's immediately visible. But no more angle, right? So if you want the angle, you can do that with the mouse. Let's make it a little bit smaller so we have more room, and go enable the mouse, the path of the brush stroke to rotate the image that's in your brush. rotate the brush. All right, thanks for watching.